setting out about a course of conduct which makes her, overly anxious and fear for her own mental state, going out of her mind, etc., then that's something which is a criminal offence and it should be followed up.
Safety is paramount. Would you not, even the Women's Refuge have volunteered to drive the woman and her daughter to anywhere they want to go. Surely that's the safest thing practically that's the safest thing to do.
That may well be the safest thing to do, but what sort of environment do we live in where a person's imprisoned by others in the community to the point that they have to have other people driving them around? That's just wrong.
So what should happen?
Well, I would like to think that if it's reported to the police, then the police should be able to keep her safe by taking the people that are causing this harassment and prosecuting them.
Now, the woman says she'll do restorative justice with one of the people who was imprisoned. Do you think that would help the situation, being face-to-face with the person, the offenders?
Restorative justice is a wonderful process in the right circumstances, but it has to be two willing parties. And there's obviously a backstory to this harassment. I don't think people harass others and gangs won't harass other people without some sort of backstory. And the thing about restorative justice, like any form of mediation, it allows people to talk through whatever it is that's causing this in the background and try and work out a way forward where they can both coexist. But you're not always dealing with rational people. And that could be one of the problems in this case. But I get back to the point. It is wrong, and it's a criminal offence in our country for people to behave like that. And I'd like to think that we live in a society where the police will take these fears seriously and prosecute them, again, if necessary.
So why aren't police pressing charges?
Well, that'll be a question you need to direct to the police officers. I can't answer that.
Yeah. Jonathan Krebs, criminal barrister, thank you very much. It's concerning stuff, isn't it, really?
Oh, terrifying.
It's just terrifying. And to think that, as you say, you've sort of opened the lid on this sort of thing happening a bit more than we perhaps might think.
Yes, I must admit I was surprised that it appears to... I'm not saying it's a widespread tactic of the police to say you need to pack your family up and leave, but it is happening.
Yeah. Now, a recent Expedia poll has looked at your pet peeves about hotels, and it seems that most were annoyed by other guests. And topping the poll at 72% were, guess what?
Children?
Inattentive parents.
Oh.
Here's my pet. Can I give you my pet peeve?
Of course.
I've got a Neil. Can you?
I want to hear it.
My bad pet peeve, and I hate it because I spent a lot of time in hotels in the last 10 years. Is bad ironing boards. There is no such thing as a good ironing board. They're all threadbare. Irons that leak water all over your shirt. You've got to go to a function at 6 p.m. You get your shirt out at 5:20. You iron. Water's all over your shirt. You've got one good shirt.
Have you not worked this out?
No.
It's because the hotel wants you to use their overpriced laundry service.
Oh, that's what it is. Anyway, what's your pet peeve?
I don't like the alarm clocks. I can't stand anything ticking or light in the bedroom, so I have to pull the alarm clock out of the wall and throw it on the floor.
Neil, briefly?
Sky TV that's missing all the main Sky TV channels.
There you go. Neil Miller, Alison Moore, it is great to have you on the panel. Wonderful stuff. And I'm back tomorrow, filling in for Jim Mora.
Not the world's smoothest transition, but we're here. Tauti maira e hoa mai he kōrero kei te haere, he kaupapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight on Checkpoint, 16 home inspections and a second mortgage on their broken home, but after 7 years, still no resolution. Southern Response customer Peter Glasson tells us why he's commencing a hunger strike from tomorrow morning. Also tonight, the stepfather of murdered teenager Carla Cardno loses his job and faces deportation after immigration says he's overstayed his welcome by decades. We talk to Mark Middleton. Spark and TVNZ do that deal for next year's Rugby World Cup. Find out what it means for you. If you like rugby, if you don't like rugby, don't bother to email in. Auckland business owners demand compensation from Vector. And 6 years after its demolition, Christchurch's brand new QE2 sports facility rises from the ashes. Well, it didn't burn, did it? Rises from the rubble.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and aho. Watching the Rugby World Cup has been described as a New Zealand right, and rural communities say they're gutted they may miss out next year. Spark and TVNZ have secured the rights to broadcast the 2019 tournament and plan to only show 7 of the 40 matches on free-to-air TV. The other games will be streamed online, with people in rural areas worried about slow internet connections. Sports commentator Keith Quinn says all New Zealanders should have access.
It's almost like there's a right that New Zealanders have to see the All Blacks at least play, and in the World Cup to see what their opponents are like. So I hope that the systems can be put in place so that everybody can see the significant games of the Rugby World Cup, because it is very important to New Zealand.
Commentator Keith Quinn. Spark says it's aware rural communities are worried they may miss out and is working to solve it before kick-off. A Southland dairy farmer says he's had apologies from health officials, but they won't bring his sight back. Kobe Brown lost the sight in his right eye in 2015 after waiting twice as long as he should have for a follow-up eye appointment for glaucoma. The Health and Disability Commissioner has found the Southern District Health Board breached patient rights over the case and may face follow-up action. Mr Kobe says he's received a payment from ACC for his last earnings and there seems no other action he can take.
There's not much more we can do. It's sort of just a slap on the hand for the DHB. I have received another apology letter from them. I don't take those for a grain of salt anymore because they can't give me my sight back, basically.
Kobe Brown believes other patients are still waiting too long for eye appointments and says that won't change until there's more eye specialists. Veteran helicopter rescue pilot John Fennell is warning lives will be lost if Taupo's rescue chopper base is closed down. A proposal to streamline the National Helicopter Service has rescue helicopters dropped from Taupo, Rotorua and Te Anau. About 1,000 people turned out in Taupo today to protest the plan. John Fennell says the rescue helicopter carries out more than 400 missions a year.
There's been a tremendous growth in that 25, 30-year period. And I can't see it reducing unless they do take the helicopter away, because a lot of the jobs, if they were to bring the helicopter in from Hamilton, the person's probably going to be deceased before they get there.
John Fennell says weather conditions would often stop helicopters from other areas getting into the region. The former FBI Director James Comey is describing Donald Trump as a man morally unfit to be president who treats women like pieces of meat. Mr Comey was giving his first major television interview since he was fired by the president last year. Hours before the interview aired on ABC News, the president went on the offensive, accusing Mr Comey of many lies and suggesting he should be imprisoned. James Comey says Donald Trump does not value the truth, but he's far from stupid.
I don't buy the stuff about him being mentally incompetent or early stages of dementia. He strikes me as a person of above average intelligence who's tracking conversations and knows what's going on. I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president.
Mr Trump fired Mr Comey in May 2017 as Mr Comey was leading an investigation into Russian meddling in the presidential election of 2016. That investigation has now expanded to include investigations into possible collusion between Trump campaign officials and Russia. New Zealand's triumphant Commonwealth Games team will arrive back in the country this evening. The team of 250 athletes scored a legendary haul of 46 medals at the Gold Coast Games, the biggest offshore haul to date. Eva Corlett reports.
The team is expected to touch down at Auckland Airport at 6:30 tonight to meet friends, family and supporters waiting at the gate. Several prominent athletes won't be on board the flight, including the gold medal winning women's sevens rugby team, which has jetted off to another tournament. As well, Dame Valerie Adams, Tom Walsh and double gold medalist Joelle King returned home early. The team will head to a special welcome home function at Novotel once they land. Ko Eva Corlett, Tēnei.
The Chief Executive of Speedway New Zealand says fierce determination and professionalism were the backbone of Ivan Major's success. New Zealand Speedway motorbike legend Ivan Major died this morning, aged 78, after several years battling a form of dementia. The Christchurch-born rider won 6 World Championships. John McCallum says he's still widely regarded as the best the sport has ever had.
He was such a driven, determined character. He came along at a time where he followed the pioneers, if you like, of Ronnie Moore and Barry Briggs coming out of Christchurch, and he had such a steely resolve to be the best, and he had that forever, whatever he did. He brought a level of professionalism that just had him rise above everybody else.
Speedway New Zealand CEO John McCallum. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the New Zealand Breakers have appointed back-to-back NBL championship winning coach and former Breakers player Kevin Braswell as its new head coach for the next 3 seasons. Braswell coached the Wellington Saints for two consecutive NBL titles in 2016 and 2017 and played point guard for the Breakers when they won their first ANBL championship title in the 2010-2011 season. He says he never imagined he would eventually return to coach his former club.
Last thing I had to do with the club is helping them win a title. And, you know, coming here as a coach, it was something that wasn't really planned in my process. But the more that we spoke about it, the more that it sounded like a great idea for me. And I just think that everything that the club stands for, everything that, you know, I stand for, everything that, you know, we've been able to accomplish together, hopefully I can bring that as a coach as well.
Kevin Braswell. The former Silver Ferns selector and player Mark Foster believes veteran coach Nolene Toda is the obvious choice as Silver Ferns coach should the upcoming Netball New Zealand review spell the end to Janine Southby's tenure. Foster says after her success both in New Zealand and Australia, the results speak for themselves.
She's got the results. She's a real people's coach, and she's a real-time coach. You know, in terms of not being pre-planned, like when you turn up to an event and you go with the flow and what's happening and you get the feel for it, she's a feel coach. And I just think she is what New Zealand's about and what we are about as a nation.
Mark Foster, that's the news.
A dash of criticism.
Certainly is another example where we're just a bit out of step with where we should be in the international community.
A sprinkle of gold.
I can't describe it. It's been a great games and let's just top that off, and I hope this is no dreams.
A taste of fish.
Do you not like fish?
I do, but I'm just going to eat the eyeballs.
Why are you going to eat the eyeballs?
Because I like them. They're nice and salty and chewy.
Join us for breakfast, Morning Report with Diane Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, as New Zealand air traffic control moves from radar-based to satellite-based navigation, what will it mean for safety, emissions and noise control? And after 10, 72-year-old soul singer P.P. Arnold on her album recorded 50 years ago with Barry Gibb and just released for the first time. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Fine spells and isolated showers. Rain later tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne. Remaining rain clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. Showers developing later tomorrow. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few showers clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. A brief period of rain from tomorrow afternoon. Northwest gales for Wairarapa tomorrow. Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country, fine spells and a few showers. However, rain tomorrow afternoon and evening. Northwest gales about Wellington tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, showers clearing and becoming fine this afternoon, but returning briefly tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, outbreaks of rain, heavy and possibly thundery from tonight. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine today, brief showers and gale northwesterlies tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers for Otago and Southland later. And the Chatham Islands, rain this evening, heavy and possibly thundery, clearing tomorrow morning. It is almost 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Coming up on the program tonight, Mark Middleton and Immigration New Zealand, Spark TVNZ and the Rugby World Cup. The latest from Syria and 1,500 Auckland homes still without power. But we begin tonight in Christchurch with the levels of frustration, helplessness and despair over protracted insurance disputes now lasting multiple years in some cases. Will tomorrow see a Southern Response claimant begin a hunger strike outside the government-owned insurer's office in Christchurch. Peter Glasson says he knows exactly what he's doing and he knows the possible outcome. But after delays in assessments, delays in court hearings and increasing financial costs mortgaged against their damaged home and the emotional and psychological toll of never making meaningful progress, he's run out of options. I spoke to Peter Glasson a short time ago.
We've got foundation problems with our house, and we've had 4 separate consulting engineers look at our house and have agreed that we need a new foundation. One of those was actually appointed by Southern Response. they then sacked that engineer and got another engineer who has come in and said, we don't need a new foundation. So that's really the basis of our dispute.
So why the hunger strike, which is a really drastic response? What's driven you to this, Peter?
We have made numerous, and I mean numerous, requests to Southern Response to sit down with us and resolve it between two parties. And they just continue to come up with reasons as to why they're not going to do that. And essentially, I asked them again by email to the CEO last week, and he just came back with a lawyer-prepared email to me saying that they wanted to do yet another inspection of our house with 13 people, and this would then be the 17th site inspection they've done of our house. And that would result in another delay of probably another 4 or 5 months.
Where are you living now? In that house?
Still living in the house, yeah.
And so you've just had a gutsful of this, have you?
We've had a gutsful of the continued delay and the very, very cunning tricks that the Southern Response lawyers undertake.
It could be delaying tricks. Certainly, if I was in your position, it would feel like delaying tricks. It's not due process here, given that your case, because the foundations are so important in terms of what wasn't assessed, what was missed in the scopes. It's not possible that this could be a precedent, this case, and therefore Southern Response, on behalf of the government, have to get it right.
It's possible that that's the case. Ours is a 1920s house, and it's a rubble foundation.
Right. So these are the foundations where there are big problems that, in many cases, in the initial scopes were missed. That's
correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
that's absolutely correct.
So is it possible, you poor buggers, that you find yourselves potentially a kind of precedent case here?
Yes, it's quite possible that they haven't told us that, but that's quite possible that they want to take this to court to force this issue through, because our foundations were built in the 1920s, and the foundations themselves are such that they can't be joined onto other parts or re-levelled properly on their own.
So, a hunger strike, Peter. I mean, you know, those of us who remember the RA Bobby Sands, you know, I mean,
I remember those too. Yes,
I mean, yeah, they're terrible things. I mean, and if you sit out the front there and no one takes any notice of you, and nothing changes, what are you going to do?
Well, I think we all know the answer to that, and I've weighed this up quite. For a long time in my mind, but we're at the end of our tether. It has been a continuous war of attrition, of financial and psychological attrition, of taking out a mortgage on our house to fight them, and we've had enough.
So you're prepared to do the hunger strike until whatever conclusion?
That's correct.
What leads you to that point?
Well, if you went through 7.5 years of it, you'd know that the continual stress, the bullying and intimidation, the dirty tricks that the lawyers play, after a while has quite an effect on you psychologically. And I'm one of those people that say that's enough. You know, your parents and mine didn't fight in the Second World War for this kind of behaviour in a free and democratic society. And so I need to undertake this.
And you were some of the people spied on by Southern Response, weren't you, for want of a better term?
That's correct. Yeah. So back in 2014, I was one of the small group of people that organised the class action against Southern Response, and it's now been confirmed to me now that Thompson and Clark private investigators in Auckland were hired by Southern Response to spy on me, and that was confirmed in a letter
Peter,
to me.
Forgive these questions, but did you make any threats against staff members? Was there any behaviour of yours that might reasonably be described as threatening?
Never, ever did anything like that. I was simply organising claimant meetings to attend a meeting. The first one was about 350 people attended a meeting at the university, and I organised that meeting.
Yeah, I remember that meeting. I remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And as a result of that, they labelled us as activists and anarchists. And I've been a planning consultant and a businessman, a company director for the last 25 years.
And did you ever, in your most appalling low points over the past 7 and a bit years, think that you would be forced into this kind of action?
No, probably in the last 6 months. It's become, since November last year, and in the last 5 months, Southern Response have done absolutely nothing at all. And in those 5 months, we've come to realise that it's just going to go on and on forever.
So what's your financial position now after 7 years of this?
Well, we've spent a massive amount of money fighting Southern Response. They know that. They've just before the last court case, they asked for our costs, and so we detailed those and sent them to us, sent them to them on the basis that we thought they were interested in settling, and 2 days later they said they weren't going to pay any of our costs. So it was a cynical way of finding out how much money we'd actually spent. So these are the games the lawyers play.
Have you spoken, obviously you've spoken to Anne, your wife, right, about this?
Correct, yes.
And she supports you in a hunger strike?
Yes.
Have you got kids?
Yep. 2 children.
And do they support you in a hunger strike?
Yes.
Why?
Well, the situation is different in Christchurch, John, than it is in Auckland, and to go through this for 7.5 years, you'd understand.
Peter Glasson talking to us earlier. We've gone to Southern Response for a response, and we are awaiting that. We will bring it to you if it comes to us before we go off air at 6:30. Southern Response are very welcome to join us on the program if they are so inclined. It's 70 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. If you want to watch most of the Rugby World Cup next year, you'll need around $100 and a decent internet connection. Now, Spark and TVNZ have secured the rights to broadcast the championship, which is being held in Japan, of course. But they say only 7 of the 40 matches will be on free-to-air TV. The other games will be streamed online for a fee, with rural communities still on ageing internet infrastructure, worried they'll miss out. Katie Scotcher reports.
Rugby has been described as the national religion, and the Rugby World Cup is the pinnacle of that obsession. But there are no guarantees all the All Blacks matches will be aired on TV. 33 games will be streamed online, and some people living in rural areas are worried their slow internet connections will stop them from cheering the team on. The president of Otautau Rugby Club in a remote part of Southland, Graham Caron, is gutted.
We've just won the last World Cup, and we're going in there as probably one of the favourites, and if the people of New Zealand can't see it, and what they're trying to do, like the rugby unions of New Zealand are trying to get the grassroots rugby up and going and keeping it going, and if we don't get to see the big guys play, then, you know, what are we going to watch and how are we going to inspire our children, sort of thing.
Federated Farmers National Vice President Andrew Hogarth says the internet isn't good enough for day-to-day errands, let alone streaming videos online.
Really, rural areas need that broadband for just doing business. You know, we're sort of where a lot of the productivity of the country comes from, you know, and yet for a number of farmers, simple things like internet banking, cloud accounting, there's all these programs we use now to run our farms, and they all rely on good internet connectivity.
Spark's General Manager of Corporate Relations, Andrew Perry, says they're aware there are people in rural communities whose current internet connection is not fast enough to stream the games. But he says they'll be doing all they can to ensure all rugby fans can be part of the action next year.
There's programs underway already, which will mean that there's a lot of customers in rural parts of New Zealand who will have much better broadband by the time the World Cup comes around in late 2019 than they have today. So those programs will be underway. So a lot of people will be getting better broadband on the way already.
Mr Perry says they're looking into other backup options for remote areas, like streaming the games at local rugby clubs. Being able to watch the games in remote parts of the country isn't the only thing rugby fans are worried about. Sky Sport costs people around $80 per month for a full subscription, while Spark says it will charge around $100 for the Rugby World Cup. People on the streets of Wellington weren't sold.
I would not pay $100, that is a waste of money.
That is ridiculous. That's so much, $100. I would not pay $100.
Well, it's a positive step, but I think it should be free for everyone. But that's a start, yeah.
It will be quite expensive, and like some people are like on a limited budget. But you know, for Rugby Crazy Nation, I think it should all be for free. I guess, like, yeah, I would be paying for it.
For the World Cup, yeah, most definitely would pay to watch. If the streaming services weren't that good, then yeah, most probably would be disappointing.
Sparks says people will be given the option to pay per game, which would be cheaper. Broadcast commentator Keith Quinn says paying to watch the games is nothing new. He says as long as people can watch the games, they'll be happy.
It's almost like there's a right that New Zealanders have to see the All Blacks at least play, and in the World Cup to see what their opponents are like. So I hope that the systems can be put in place so that everybody can see the significant games of the Rugby World Cup, because it is very important to New Zealand.
The New Zealand Rugby Union aren't too worried about the new arrangements, with the union's chief executive Steve Chew saying times are changing and online streaming should suit the vast majority of fans. The Spark TVNZ deal also includes broadcasts of the Rugby Sevens, Under-20 Championships and the Women's Rugby World Cup. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Katie Scotcher-Tene.
21 minutes past 5. The Associate Minister for Immigration has received a request for ministerial intervention in the case of Mark Middleton, who 56 years after he arrived in New Zealand as a preschooler, was last week picked up from his work by immigration officials and held overnight in a police cell. Mark Middleton was the stepfather of 13-year-old Lower Hutt girl Carla Cardno, abducted by Paul Joseph Daly as she rode her bike home from local shops. In 1989, Daly raped Carla Cardno, then severely beat her and buried her alive. He was jailed for her murder in 1990. In 2001, Mark Middleton received a suspended prison sentence for threatening to kill Daly should he ever be released from prison. Mark Middleton has no other convictions. He and Carla's mum, Veronica, now raised their teenage son together, Carla's half-brother, of course. Earlier this afternoon, Mark Middleton told me what happened last Tuesday.
Well, I got a call in the morning asking me from the Lower Hutt police station, asking me if I'd go in, and I said, yep, not a problem. They said, where are you at the moment? I said, I'm up the line. And they said, when can you make it here? I said, I'll pop down and I'll be in the police station at 4 o'clock.
So you told them you'd come into the police station. You were quite happy to do that. You said you'd go in at 4 o'clock. And you would have gone, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely I would have. But anyway, they turned up in my work and got me out on the pavement and arrested me and took me down to Wellington Central and, you know, took a few of my things off me and my belt and my shoes and chucked me in a cold cell for a couple of days, so, you know.
Who turned up at work? Who came to get you?
Immigration and the police.
And how did they treat you?
Oh, it was pretty hostile, John. Pretty hostile.
And what did they say you were being treated in this fashion for? What was the thing that you were alleged to have done?
They told me that they had no records of me pre-86 and that I'd snuck into the country and I was an overstayer.
You were a pretty precocious overstayer because you snuck into the country aged 4, right, which is quite clever.
And I enrolled myself in school, let's not forget that.
Yeah. So you were 4 years old when you arrived. And I think, if I've got the details correct, you've left New Zealand once in your life since then, right? You went on a family holiday to Fiji in 86.
Yeah, that's correct, yep. And that was a bit of a disaster because the coup happened.
And you came back, and immigration, when you returned from the family holiday to the coup in 86, immigration said, who are you?
No, they didn't. They just stamped my passport and let me in.
And so you are...
They just let me in.
Right. And so in what way are you an overstayer?
Well, I don't know. I've been asking, you see, my lawyer and I have been feeding off emails to immigration now all last week and over the weekend and today asking for the file, and they're not giving it to us at the moment. I don't know why.
So you're not getting your own file. Had you had any official warning? Had you had any correspondence from them saying that this was about to happen?
Yeah, well, no, but they did say they sent me a letter 30 years ago or something, and I don't recall getting that letter, but, you know, that's what they said they've done.
So what are you going to do?
Well, what can I do, John, you know? What can I do? I've just got to make submissions to immigration. If that fails, I've got to go to the Associate Minister. And if all else fails, then they're going to ship me out somewhere to a foreign country.
And it would be a foreign country, wouldn't it? When were you last in England?
1962.
Yeah, it was a bloody stupid question because you've only been to Fiji since you arrived, right? So do you know anyone there? Have you got any family there? Is there any connection with England?
No, not really. I know there's a couple of cousins or something over there, but I wouldn't know them if I even walked by them in the street. I haven't kept in touch, you know, as you probably should do, but, you know, I don't know anybody over there. It's hard to say, really, but I'm a friendly bugger, you know.
Hey, so are you working? Have you been able to go back to work?
No, they've immigration rang up my employers and terminated my employment.
Wait, so you are the breadwinner. How long have you been in that job for, Mark?
Oh, about 2 and a bit years or something.
What is it? What were you doing?
Oh, I was teaching building, construction and trade schools.
And immigration phoned your boss?
Yep.
And said what?
Told them to terminate my employment.
This is all really peculiar, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's pretty heavy, actually, John. You know, New Zealand puts itself out as the bastion of human rights and so on, and it's just like, this is really pretty heavy, I thought. Pretty heavy-handed, anyway. It's sort of take no prisoner stuff, isn't it? You know? Might be, I don't know, even if it was a technicality, mate, you know, even if they have got me on a technicality, I mean, surely it can be sorted out.
Without pulling you into the cells and holding you in the cells? Do they hold you in overnight?
Yeah, they took me in there and stripped me down and put me in the cells. It was bloody cold, I got to say. Got some canvassy thing, excuse for a blanket, and had my food served up on the floor next to the toilet, you know. So I just wasn't prepared to eat it, not prepared to eat that, you know, for cultural reasons.
And did anyone call Veronica and tell her where you were?
No, nobody.
So you had just disappeared without trace, which in the context of what Veronica has gone through is actually a terrible thing.
Oh, it's an awful, awful thing. You know, I asked them to contact her, but they wouldn't. I said, at least just give me my phone and let me ring her, you know, so that she knows. But they wouldn't let me do that, and they didn't contact her at all, and she was absolutely, you know, distraught. And my youngest boy, he was just all over the place, you know.
Mark Middleton. So what does Immigration New Zealand say to all of this? Well, they wouldn't be interviewed, referring us to a day-old written statement instead. So we went to the Associate Minister's office, who referred us to Immigration New Zealand, saying they were responding. We pointed out that they weren't responding. The Associate Minister's office then told us a request for ministerial intervention had just been received and they couldn't therefore comment. Immigration New Zealand then said they couldn't talk while the Minister considers the case, and so no one is available to respond to Mr Middleton. We would love to talk to anyone. Just give yourselves permission to do it and phone in. It's 29 minutes past 5. There are still 1,500 homes and businesses in Auckland without power, almost a week after the city was lashed by fierce winds, and in some places they could be waiting until Sunday to get their power back. One Piha resident has had to buy his own generator because he says there are none left to rent in Auckland, and another business is asking for Lions Company Vector to compensate businesses who've lost money because of the long delays in restoring power. Te Manu Korehi reporter John Boynton has more.
Jeff Calvert lives at the end of Glenesk Road in Piha. He's into his 6th day without power after high winds lashed the city last Tuesday night. He runs the Piha Beach Day and says he's had to take out a loan to buy a generator to keep the lights and his business going.
I did go and purchase a generator. It cost me $7,000, is it my only option really? Otherwise we just have to leave the premises, had a lot of future bookings and, a bit of inconvenience all those people and lose money and things like that.
Mr. Calvert is outraged about how long it's taking to have his power restored. He says Vector needs to take better care of remote communities and have clearer lines of communication.
Really, I'd like to see a bit more maintenance on their lines, especially to remote areas like Piha, where I think we're even more reliant on power for basic things like water, cell phone coverage.
I heard the dairy was operating with a torch.
Yes, and a candle.
Maureen Ballard was back at work today and sharing stories about the struggle she and other business owners faced trying to run without power. Her cafe on Buckley Road in Epsom is part of a block of 5 businesses which got their power back on yesterday afternoon. This morning she was even busier than usual, whipping up a storm to quickly restock her bare food cabinets.
Oh, what are you making? Spinach and feta pie.
Miss Ballard estimates the power outage will have cost her around $5,000 because of lost business and having to get rid of food. She says it was frustrating just trying to lodge the power outage with Vector.
I finally got through. They said the job hadn't been logged in, which it had been for days. I mean, the whole neighbourhood had logged it and was following the app, so someone's fouled up big time.
Maureen Ballard says the repair took all of about 30 minutes and should have been fixed earlier to stop businesses having to close their doors. She says her insurance won't cover her lost revenue, but she thinks Vector should come to the party with compensation for the time it took to get the power back on.
Because they kept telling us every day that we were having our power on at certain times and it never happened. They just kept changing the app. In the end, we just had to empty the freezer and take it and put it around people's houses, so we didn't lose that.
2 customers returning to their regular spot for coffee today had differing views on Vector's response to the power outages. Jan Witten knows the hard work Maureen puts into running her own business.
Hopefully they'll look at this and they'll actually look at, planning for something should it ever happen again, because small business is the one that's really suffering.
Ida Seegers has seen many of Vector's line crews working hard in the region and says Aucklanders need to toughen up.
They have invested a lot of time and sometimes we just have to toughen up a little bit. These situations happen in many countries, sometimes often. We have been extremely lucky in New Zealand.
In a statement, Vector said it's not in a position to compensate for the loss of electricity supply as a consequence of significant weather events. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko John Boynton aho.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ, and thank you for being with us. Coming up, hundreds take to the streets of Taupo to protest the closure of the area's rescue helicopter service. Nearly half of New Zealanders want to keep working after they reach retirement age. And Speedway icon Ivan Mauger, boy, he was a big part of my childhood, KB.
Yeah, me too.
Passes away at the age of 78. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We are, of course, on Facebook. Very quickly, an email. Then I'm embarrassed to be a New Zealander hearing the story of Mark Middleton. Citizenship, he should change his name to Peter Teal. It is 26.5 to 6. Here's the headlines with Katrina.
Rural communities say they're gutted. They may miss out on the Rugby World Cup next year because of poor internet coverage. Spark and TVNZ have secured the rights to broadcast the 2019 tournament and plan to show only 7 of the 40 matches on free-to-air TV. The other games will be streamed on the internet. Sports commentator Keith Quinn says all New Zealanders have a right to see the All Blacks play, and he hopes a system can be established so they can see all the games. A Southland dairy farmer who lost the sight in one eye while waiting for an eye operation says he hopes the health board can bring in more eye specialists. Kobe Brown waited twice as long as he should have for treatment for glaucoma and says an apology from the Southern District Health Board won't bring back his sight. The Health and Disability Commissioner has found the board breached patient rights over the case and may face follow-up action. Veteran helicopter rescue pilot John Fennell says weather conditions would often stop helicopters from other areas getting into the Taupō region. The National Helicopter Service is proposing choppers to be chopped from Taupō, Rotorua and Te Anau. But John Fennell says bringing in a helicopter from Hamilton may not be quick enough to save lives. Our Commonwealth Games team arrives back in Auckland in about an hour. The 250-strong team scored an unprecedented 46 medal haul. The team will head to a special welcome home function at a Novotel once they land. The Associate Minister for Immigration, Chris Farfoy, has been asked to intervene in the case of Mark Middleton, who faces deportation after living in New Zealand for 56 years. He's accused of being in New Zealand unlawfully after going overseas for a holiday in 1986. Mr Middleton is the stepfather of Carla Cardno, a teen from Lower Hutt who was murdered in 1989. Mark Middleton told John Campbell if the request for intervention and submissions to immigration fail, he'll be shipped out to England, where he hasn't been since he was 4. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. On all week, Nona. Is that right?
Oh, yes, it's my turn this week.
Excellent. Well, we're delighted to have you. Let's begin with Australian investment company Alliston Capital taking a 5% stake in Fletcher Building. Why? What do they want?
We heard this last week about Wesfarmers, that perhaps they were taking a stake into Fletcher Building because the company's been looking cheap with all of its problems with the building interiors division. And then today we got a notice from the market that no, it's another company, and this organization is a fund manager, manages funds on behalf of government, super funds, larger institutional type of investment schemes. Whether or not they're representing Wesfarmers is a bit of a mystery. At this stage, we don't know that. They only have to disclose that they have 5% of the company. They've been buying shares in Fletcher Building since the end of last year, and they've now got up to 5% as of Friday. So, yeah, and as a result of that...
In monetary terms, do you know the answer to this question? It's really mean to ask you this question. How much have they spent? Do you know all that?
Well, it would have been, I guess, an average of the price from the end of last year to now. And as a matter of fact, Fletcher Building's share price fell 1%. So let's see. Actually, it's funny that you asked me this because I checked it out just before.
Nona. Yeah.
Right. So at the beginning of this month, the share price was $5.74.
Yeah.
As of today, it was $6.27. But that's down from where it was on Friday, and that's because Wesfarmers would have been seen as a perhaps takeover party, whereas this is just a fund manager investing at this stage.
It's a trading position. Who knows whether it's long-term or short-term?
Exactly. And they are opportunists. Yeah. So in this case, the share price fell about 1% to that level. And at the best it's been in the past year was $8.78, and that was in May last year. Right. So, yeah, overall, the share price has been pretty low.
That keeps on giving the Fletcher Building story, isn't it amazing?
Really? Well, you'd expect that to go on for some time, I'd say.
Right. A second consecutive bad harvest is going to savage the profits of honey and oils company Comvita.
Yeah.
What's the damage there, no?
It's actually substantial. The company is expecting to make between 8 and 11 million, and that's against a previous forecast of 17 million. Now, I did some checking last year. The company made, I guess just $15 million. Well, rather, 15 million. But that was actually in respect of mostly a gain from the sale of one of their businesses. So the company's been struggling for a while, and it's pretty much it's bad weather. But interestingly, because they had to give a warning on their forecast, they also had to disclose that there's another company sniffing around, looking at maybe a takeover offer for Comvita, another company that's looking cheap. So it's had a really tough time, and it's starting to show on their share price.
Right. What the markets do today?
So Comvita's share price strangely rose because of the potential takeover.
Yep.
So it was up 0.5%. Fletcher Building, I already mentioned, was down. Sparks, now I thought you might be interested in this because of the rugby talk. So Sky TV shares rose nearly 2% today. Crazy, huh? And Sparks rose more than 1%. Will remain to be seen. What the market is a fickle beast at times.
It is.
And so overall, our index is down 8 points, and that's mostly because of Asia and the sentiment that's really confused over what's happening with Syria and all the other stuff that keeps coming out of the U.S. Dollar's trading it's steady, that 73.5 US cents, pretty high, 94.6 Australian and 51.6 pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. Nona mentioned Syria. We'll have the latest from there shortly. But let's go to the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast, which came to a strange flat old end last night, with organisers copping criticism from fans, athletes, spectators, basically everyone with a mouth, really. Many left the closing ceremony early, and there was anger over the fact the host broadcaster didn't show the athletes' entrance into the stadium. Organisers have now admitted they got it wrong. Here's the ABC's Angus Randall.
The Commonwealth Games are a two-week celebration of some of the best sporting talent the world has to offer. But during last night's closing ceremony, athletes were barely seen. Channel 7 hosts Joanna Griggs and Basil Zemplis weren't impressed.
You're actually wrecking a tradition that is so important and part of Commonwealth Games. You want to see the athletes come in, you want to see them jumping in front of a camera, you want to see them celebrating 11 days of great sport. We missed out on all of that, and I tell you, they've been repaid. There's no athletes in here, and I've never seen a stadium so empty halfway through a ceremony.
It is very unfortunate. It's a great disappointment too. As we said at the start, it's been just the most wonderful 11 days, but unfortunately tonight, the hosts, the organising committee, together with the host broadcasters, just didn't get it right.
Viewers at home missed the opportunity to watch Australia's athletes enter the stadium, including retiring champion and flag bearer Kurt Fearnley. And Channel 7's commentary team was at pains to stress it wasn't their fault.
It hasn't really lived up to expectations, and I've got to say, about the only thing they got wrong, but they did get it wrong tonight.
I'm sorry, you're being way too polite. People are thinking that Channel 7 has chosen not to show pictures of athletes or not to show the flag bearer Kurt Fearnley and other flag bearers from nations coming in. We're the Australian rights holders, so we can only show the pictures that are provided by the actual host broadcasters.
On social media, many were directing their ire towards Channel 7, but the host broadcaster is the US-based NEP Group, and Games officials have acknowledged the stuff-up. The Gold Coast Organising Committee chairman, Peter Beattie, says it was driven by concern over athletes' welfare.
If they didn't come into the stadium until the actual broadcast time, they would have been stuck in a field or stuck in a paddock somewhere. We didn't want that. So what we did was, being concerned about athlete welfare, we brought them into the stadium in the pre-show. The mistake we made was that we didn't then include them in the actual broadcast.
On the journey out of the stadium, those at the ceremony were still content with what they saw.
Fantastic.
But you're leaving before it's finished? Why is that?
The last bit wasn't great.
Just a bit slow, or?
Yeah, it wasn't right for the audience. It was targeted more at the older people rather than the younger generation.
Although many shared the same concerns as those who'd stayed home.
Probably I would have loved to see more of the athletes, but other than that, I think they did a really great job. It was nice to see Birmingham coming up, and we just got to meet one of the performers from Birmingham, so that was cool to see too.
Others were just happy to be a part of the event.
The singing and the athletes coming into the field, I thought that was really good and just showed how successful that we've been. And yeah, just a really good vibe in there with the singing and the athletes and the volunteers. They were really, really awesome, and they've been working long, hard hours tonight, I think.
A spectator ending that report from the ABC's Angus Randall. It's 2 days since a series of US-led airstrikes on locations in Syria in retaliation for a suspected chemical weapons attack, and there's no sign of any further military action from the West. But on the diplomatic front, the US is set to announce fresh sanctions against Russia for its support of the Syrian government. They'll target Russian companies allegedly involved in Syria's chemical weapons program. Moscow has condemned the weekend missile strikes and is warning any further attacks will result in international chaos. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen has more.
In Damascus, journalists were allowed to see one of the targets. The Syrians deny it was a complex used to research and develop chemical and biological weapons. In the end, the whole operation was a limited attack, a punishment, and a message that the West won't tolerate the use of chemical weapons. Powerful hardware was used, an American B-1 bomber loading up at its base in the United States. No wonder there were fears that the raids could make Syria's war even worse and risk a confrontation with Russia and Iran, the Syrian regime's main allies. But their targets were chosen to avoid hitting them. President Assad's regime was not hit either. His conclusion will be that the US, France and Britain, for all their power, are not prepared to touch him. Deya al-Mohammed, his wife al-Noor and their children were caught up in the attack in Douma a week ago. al-Noor and their daughter Master's accounts of what happened seemed to corroborate reports it was a chemical attack. The BBC managed to track them down to the relative safety of a camp in northern Syria.
البراميل صار ينزل غبرة على الأقبية.
I saw white smoke like fog. Our legs started to get weak. We started to lose the nerves in our legs. Had a shortness of breath and burning in the nose and chest. There was no oxygen, and we were fighting death to go upstairs and reach the higher floors.
People were dying. Suddenly the civil defence came. They put us on the ground and poured water on us. Then they took us to the medical centre, sprayed us, gave us injections. I was fainting. My heart was aching. When we went to sleep, the plane shelled and we were covered in dust. We went back down to the basement and saw how they were bringing the martyrs. Instead of breathing air, we breathed the smell of blood.
In Duma, the Russian military brought in heavy equipment to start clearing rubble. Another chemical attack might change things, but after the Western rhetoric and raids, this looks like business as usual.
Jeremy Bowen for the BBC, of course. The threat to a vital lifeline has seen up to 1,000 people take to the streets in Taupo today. The town is up in arms over a proposal that would see it lose its rescue helicopter base. The proposal by the National Ambulance Sector Office would see rescue helicopter bases taken away from the central North Island town, as well as neighbouring Rotorua and Te Ano in the south, of course. A petition is circulating and a meeting is planned with the government next week. But today, the people of Taupo vented their frustrations. And our excellent reporter Andrew McRae was there.
Last year, the Taupo-based Greenlee Rescue Helicopter carried out over 400 missions, many down in the Tongariro National Park, and it crashes on the desert road. The man who first brought a rescue chopper to Taupo in the early 80s, John Fennell, says if the changes go ahead, the nearest helicopter is likely to be based in Hamilton.
Having to wait another 25-30 minutes for a helicopter to come from Hamilton, it's fine. I can tell you on a day like today, even Hamilton, using bad weather techniques, will struggle to get into Taupo.
John Fennell says decisions are being made without any consultation with locals who know the area.
And these people in Wellington who are making these decisions, without consultation with you people here, are making bad decisions. What they don't appreciate is that 50% of the cost of the service provided in Taupo is funded by sponsors and by you people here.
Christine Rankin's a member of the Lakes District Health Board. She says the board heard about the proposal at the same time as the public, and it's angry.
Not a word of warning, no discussion and no advice sought. And we as a board will be doing everything we can to change it.
Local MP Nationals Louise Upston told the crowd that she's had first-hand experience of the rescue helicopter. She says one day out with police, they received a call to a shooting and they had to administer CPR.
And I remember doing CPR, feeling incredibly desperate until I heard the sound of the chopper. And for any of you that are here that have heard that sound coming to you in a time of desperate need, you will know what it makes you feel.
Sandy Stead has used the services of the rescue helicopter twice after suffering serious injuries horse riding.
And I wanted to speak today to say how grateful I am for the service. The helicopter service has picked me up twice in 3 years. You could say I've got frequent flyer points.
Julia Prest went into premature labour at 28 weeks and started hemorrhaging when the rescue helicopter came to her. She says without them, she and her daughter wouldn't be here today.
And my 4 other children at home would have lost their mum and their sister, so I owe my life to the helicopter, and I'm no one famous, but I do owe my life, and so does my daughter.
Those who braved the rain to show their support for the rescue helicopter service were in no doubt what it means to them.
You need local knowledge and you need prompt response.
People are going to be dead before they get there. We need this helicopter. We need it Taupo and Rotorua.
Bringing the helicopter in from Hawke's Bay, Palmerston, New Plymouth or Hamilton is just totally unacceptable.
Well, I think, we've got to have more services for the New Zealand people, not less for the New Zealand people.
I believe if they don't have the helicopter here, there could be life and death occasions that, we just badly need it.
The Mayor of Taupo will be meeting with government ministers next week. And in the meantime, a petition calling for the service to be retained is circulating. In Taupo for Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
The New Zealander, widely regarded as the best motorcycle speedway rider ever, is being remembered as a fiercely determined character and a consummate professional, including by people texting in. Some lovely texts arriving. Ivan Mauger died this morning, aged 78, ending a battle of several years with a form of dementia. Clay Wilson with more about the man known to many as simply Mr. Speedway.
Half a lap to go, and Mauger looks safe. It's going to be the 5th world title win for Ivan Mauger. Mauger takes it and he raises his hand as Mauger takes his 5th world final win, and he equals the all-time record by Ove Flynn of Sweden of 5 world championship wins. And with that win in heat 18, the new world champion Ivan Mauger tonight.
6 individual world championship titles, 3 world long track crowns, and 1,000 event wins across 26 countries during a career spanning 3 decades. There is no denying Ivan Mauger was a speedway legend. A legend driven from an early age in his hometown of Christchurch to be the best.
I had my first meeting at Aranui in Christchurch. When I was 15, I just told a few fibs about my date of birth. We put on a year just to, because you couldn't get a licence until you were 16. My first bike was about 65 pounds. And that was a lot of money because I was only getting like £1 a week after working after school.
Such was his determination to succeed. Before his school years were done, a 17-year-old Mauger left for Britain to chase his dream. His first attempts to break through in the sport failed, and he returned home to race throughout Australasia. But when he went back to the UK in 1963, his fortunes changed, and he became a dominant figure in British speedway and on the international stage. He won his first individual world championship in 1968 and his last in 1979. The same year he captained and coached New Zealand to a world team title, riding injured to secure crucial points. Thanks to a bet made in 1970, the bike he won his 3rd world championship title on became a golden testament to his achievement.
After I won the world championship 2 years in a row, some American businessmen promised that if I won it 3 years in a row, which had never been done before, they would gold plate the bike. And it took about 18 months to completely gold plate.
While Mauger spent most of his career racing in Britain, from 1965 until he retired in 1986 to Australia's Gold Coast, he returned to New Zealand every year to promote speedway. Speedway New Zealand Chief Executive John McCallum says Mauger never forgot his roots.
If you're going to be successful in that sport, Europe's where you've got to be based, and he was for a long period before retiring to Australia. But he was always a very proud Kiwi and kept a local interest. He still followed the All Blacks and the Crusaders, and he was a proud Canterbury man.
The key to Mauger's success, though, was an intense drive to win and meticulous nature.
People would argue that Ivan perhaps wasn't the most gifted rider that ever sat on a bike, but he was more determined and his preparation was better, and he just worked extra harder. He was just such a competitor.
Mauger's many achievements brought much recognition, including an MBE in 1976 and an OBE in 1989. In 1990, he was one of the 75 inaugural members inducted into the New Zealand Sports Hall of Fame. But in an interview with RNZ in 2013, he admitted interest in the sport had dropped off.
They're not as big now because there's no magic names that can draw people to the stadiums. I was a magic name and several other guys were a magic name, and when they were announced that such and such a person is going to be riding next week, everyone in the town wanted to go, but there's not those magic names now.
Mauger withdrew from public life in 2013 as his health began to deteriorate. 2 years later, it was revealed he was being treated for a communication disorder and was receiving daily treatment at a Gold Coast nursing home. He is survived by his wife Ray and their 3 children. Moti hotaka otia hipo nei, ko Clay Wilson aho.
Let's return to Christchurch. We've been there a few times tonight. QE2 was once the jewel of the city, really. Well, one of them. A multi-purpose sports facility built to host the 1934 Commonwealth Games. I went. I had a NZ tank top knitted by my grandmother. However, the Canterbury earthquakes damaged the complex and it was demolished in 2012. Now, almost 6 years later, as a new, admittedly smaller QE2 has risen from rubble, it's expected to open next month. But not everyone is happy with everything in the new building. Logan Church went along to have a look.
Workers at Christchurch's new QE2 facility are racing to finish the job ahead of its expected opening at the end of next month. Senior Project Manager Steve Hasty says it's the biggest job of its type he has ever attempted, and there were significant challenges.
One of the big challenges too was the fact that 10 million of the equipment in this facility is all from different places around the world. So we've got the movable floor out of the UK, the hydroslide and aquaplay behind me out of Canada, the pools are out of the US, we've got skylights out of Israel.
The original facility, built to host the 1974 Commonwealth Games, included a running track, diving pool and a public pool. But the Canterbury earthquakes devastated the facility, and the Christchurch City Council decided it would be too costly to repair it. The council's head of sport and recreation, John Filsell, says the new $38.6 million facility will have a slightly different focus from its predecessor.
Primarily the new facility aims to cater to the northeast of town rather than having the old international focus. So the main national event facilities will move into the middle of town. This focuses on fun, it focuses on recreation. It has a primary focus on children, but also on older adults. This building features a 130-metre long blue hydroslide, a 25-metre lap pool, a leisure pool with a lazy river, a learn-to-swim pool, a hydrotherapy pool, a spa, a steam room, a sauna, a fitness centre, and a cafe. It's kitted out with the latest technology, including a $1 million rising floor in the main lap pool. John Filsell says he expects it to be well used by the community. We've certainly got a swimming pool here capable of hosting a number of events. We're engaging with the community about the wider use of QE2 Park at the moment, so watch this space. But the community have been looking forward to this for a while. It will alleviate a deficit in facilities that we've had since the quake.
But local councillor David East says the lap pool size could put off swimming events being hosted at the site. He would rather it was 50 metres long, the length required for professional swimming events.
It just completes the whole picture. It becomes a citywide recreational facility. We're not duplicating something in town as well, but yeah, I'm keen to see what was here and originally restored. It's probably fairly parochial, but we in the East certainly valued the facility when it was here, and if we can have that back again at some stage, it'd be great.
Nevertheless, David East says the community has missed having swimming facilities available locally.
We've had a complete generation of young kids in the city that have missed out on Learn to Swim, and for me that's a vital part of living in an island nation that we do, that all kids have access to learning to swim, and it does concern me greatly that a number of our younger population have missed out on that.
The council expects the new QE2 facility to be open to the public from Queen's Birthday weekend. There is still no word on when ground will be broken on either of the city's two other major sports facilities, the new stadium and the Metro Sports facility. From Christchurch for Checkpoint, Ko Logan Church Tēnei.
Coming up to 2 minutes to 6, protesters have swarmed a Starbucks restaurant as tensions run high in Philadelphia following the controversial arrest of two African-American men last week. A video of the two men being arrested last Thursday went viral. It has gone totally global, and it is pretty disturbing to watch. Here's Reuters' Nathan Frandino.
Protesters on Sunday descended on the Starbucks in Philadelphia where last week two black men were arrested, sparking accusations of racial profiling. The several dozen demonstrators called for a boycott and for those responsible for the incident to lose their jobs. The incident last Thursday was caught on video and shared widely online. The video showed several bystanders telling police officers that the two men did nothing wrong.
They didn't do anything. I saw the entire thing. They did nothing.
The city's police commissioner says his officers had to act after Starbucks employees called 911 with a trespassing complaint. Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson later apologized for the incident, and the company declined to prosecute the two men. But for protesters on Sunday, the damage has been done.
We cannot have any dialogue until the manager is fired. That's a demand.
Starbucks Regional Vice President Camille Himes.
We know that we have work to do. We have worked very closely with the community here in Philadelphia. It literally breaks my heart.
The company says it is reviewing its policies and will work to prevent something like this from happening again.
That report from Reuters. Southern Response have been in touch. They are not going to comment on the Peter Glasson interview earlier in the program. Mark Middleton also interviewed earlier in the program about Immigration New Zealand. We've received this from Deirdre. I'm wondering what sort of country we've become. People still unresolved after an earthquake 7 years ago and going on hunger strike. A man thrown in the cells for no apparent good reason and denied letting his wife know, and a helicopter being removed from our most testing area of Central Plateau for rescue. What has happened to those at the helm? It is just so sad. Lots of angry footage coming in on Mark Middleton. Thank you. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Associate Minister for Immigration, Chris Farfoy, has been asked to intervene in the case of Mark Middleton, who faces deportation after living in New Zealand for 56 years. He's accused of being in New Zealand unlawfully after going to Fiji for a holiday in the mid-80s. Mr Middleton told John Campbell if the request for intervention and submissions to immigration fail, he'll be shipped out to England, which he left with his family for New Zealand when he was 4 years old. He's not been able to find out how he became an overstayer.
My lawyer and I have been feeding off emails to immigration now all last week and over the weekend and today asking for the file, and they're not giving it to us at the moment. I don't know why.
Mark Middleton says he's been told immigration sent him a letter 30 years ago, but he doesn't remember getting it. Mr Middleton is the stepfather of Carla Cardno, the Lower Hutt schoolgirl murdered in 1989. A Christchurch homeowner with an unresolved earthquake insurance claim intends to begin a hunger strike outside Southern Response's office in the city tomorrow. Peter Glasson says his home was badly damaged in the 2011 quake and needs new foundations, but he's still fighting with the government-owned insurer to have his policy honoured. Mr Glasson told Checkpoint after delays in assessments and court hearings, increasing financial costs and the emotional toll of never making meaningful progress, he's run out of options and is going on a hunger strike.
I've weighed this up for a long time in my mind, but we're at the end of our tether. There has been a continuous war of attrition, of financial and psychological attrition, and we've had enough.
Peter Glasson says he'll continue the hunger strike, which he plans to start tomorrow morning, until he's achieved a resolution for his claim with Southern Response. James Comey, the man sacked as director of the FBI, says he believes Donald Trump is morally unfit to be president. Mr Comey's comments were broadcast in an interview with ABC News in the US. Mr Comey also says it's possible that the Russians had material that could be used to blackmail Mr Trump, and there was certainly some evidence the president had obstructed justice. The BBC's Chris Buckler reports.
Donald Trump had in recent days called James Comey a liar, a leaker and an untruthful slimeball. In a primetime television interview, the man he fired as FBI director fired back. He said it was possible that the Russians had incriminating information about President Trump and prostitutes, and that at one stage he might have tried to obstruct justice, both things that the White House has strongly denied. But he was definitive in his statement that Donald Trump wasn't morally fit to be president. The latest strike in a battle between two men who, in defending their own reputations, seem intent on destroying the others.
Chris Buckler in Washington. A Matoda farmer who lost sight in one eye over a delayed eye appointment is trying to move on. The Health and Disability Commissioner says the Southern DHB will face possible action in the Human Rights Review Tribunal over the case in 2015. Kobe Brown was seen in September 2014 and his doctor recommended he return in 6 months' time. That appointment never happened, and it was only badgering by Mr Brown that got him seen a year later. By that time it was too late to save his sight. Mr Brown says he's resigned to it now, but it's not good enough.
If I could get it back, I would probably go back to 2 eyes. But since it's not going to happen anytime soon, I guess I just have to come to terms with it and just carry on day by day.
Kobe Brown. Only 2 DHBs, Nelson Marlborough and Southern, have ever been referred for follow-up action in the tribunal. Those cases were over disability and audiology respectively, both in 2013. The New Zealand Rugby Union boss, Steve Tew, says the move to stream the Rugby World Cup online shouldn't be an issue for most New Zealanders. Spark and TVNZ have signed to a deal to buy the broadcast rights for next year's tournament in Japan, but will only play 7 games on free-to-air TV. The others will be streamed online. Mr Tew says some people in remote areas may have trouble watching the games online, but regardless of how the games are broadcast, someone will always miss out.
Yeah, well, it's the same issue with traditional television and satellite television, isn't it? Not all of New Zealand gets everything, but as I said before, everyone's desire here is to get the game in front of many people as possible, and the world's changing.
Steve Tew from the New Zealand Rugby Union. Meanwhile, viewing figures suggest more New Zealanders tuned in to watch the Commonwealth Games on free-to-air television than the 2016 Rio Olympics on Sky and Prime TV. According to Nielsen data, 2.6 million viewers watched the Rio Olympics compared to 2.9 million viewers for the Commonwealth Games. An additional 2.3 million online live streams were recorded over the course of 10 days. A TVNZ spokesperson says the events are hard to compare given the great time difference between New Zealand and the Gold Coast. The Rio Olympics also didn't have the same online platform as this year's Commonwealth Games. It's 6:05. Sport, it's onward and upwards for the New Zealand Breakers after recruiting head coach and former Breakers point guard Kevin Braswell on a 3-year deal. The former coach Paul Henare mysteriously stepped down, ending a 15-year career with the side following the Breakers bowing out of the ANBL competition in the semi-finals. The new owner Matt Walsh has given an assurance that the club is moving forward with no animosity left behind.
You always kind of know that things are a possibility. We were a little caught off guard. I understand this business probably better than most. I played in Europe. I was cut. I was hired. I understand that sometimes emotions come into play, and so it wasn't a total surprise. But everything has worked its way out, and now we're really excited about the future and Kevin, taking over.
Matt Walsh. The New Zealand Speedway champion Ivan Mauger has died aged 78. Mauger was the holder of 6 individual World Championship titles between 1968 and 1979 and also claimed 3 World Long Track crowns. In his 30 years as a speedway rider, he won more than 1,000 events in 26 countries and was recognised with an MBE in 1976 and an OBE in 1989. Mauger was also one of the 75 inaugural members inducted into the New Zealand Sports Hall of Fame in 1990. The New Zealand NBA star Steven Adams has scored 12 points and 7 rebounds in the Oklahoma City Thunder's first playoff game in 5 years, beating the Utah Jazz 116-108 in Game 1 of 7. Game 2 starts on Thursday at midday. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Dana Johansson looks back at the Commonwealth Games, the winners, the losers, the surprises. We have a window on the world of the World Trade Organisation. And Peter Hall looks at the early history of recorded sound in New Zealand, from the phonograph to the talkies, and of course, radio.
And on Lately at 10, we feature Lately Reads with NZ book lovers and an author reading. We'll have an eye not only on books, but music, people and politics, keeping you up to date with the world at the other end of the day. Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, fine spells and isolated showers. Rain later tomorrow. Bay of Plenty in Gisborne, remaining rain clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. Showers developing later tomorrow. For Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few showers clearing this afternoon and becoming fine. A brief period of rain from tomorrow afternoon. Northwest gales for Wairarapa tomorrow. Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country, fine spells and a few showers. However, rain tomorrow afternoon and evening. Northwest gales about Wellington tomorrow. For Marlborough and Nelson, showers clearing and becoming fine this afternoon, but returning briefly tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, outbreaks of rain, heavy and possibly thundery from tonight. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine today. Brief showers and gale northwesterlies tomorrow morning, followed by a few showers for Otago and Southland later. The Chatham Islands, rain this evening, heavy and possibly thundery, clearing tomorrow morning. It's almost 6:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
And Katrina Batten. Thank you very much, Katrina Batten. And also with a lot of feedback from people about Mark Middleton. Boy, there's a heap of it. And none of you are impressed by his treatment. We'd love to talk to Immigration New Zealand about this. They aren't fronting his case. Middleton's case is now before the Associate Immigration Minister. Will update you on anything the moment it comes to hand. But thank you for your feedback. People are incensed in great number. Auckland's Mayor Phil Goff has undergone a life-saving procedure over the weekend after chest pains revealed he had 2 blocked arteries. Mr Goff, who's now recovering in Auckland's Middleton Hospital after angioplasty, says doctors told him the outcome could have been much worse, potentially dreadful, if he hadn't sought medical attention on Saturday morning.
I had one 90% blockage that then became 100% blockage, which caused the incident, and then the other was the more serious one was 75% blocked. If that had a block, then I wouldn't be talking to you now.
No, you wouldn't. So when you say the incident, what happened?
Oh, it's we've got a genetic history in our family of heart disease, which is clogging up of the arteries. So I've just had an uncle coming to see me. He's in his 80s now. He was a marathon runner. Did 15, 20 miles a night, and he had a triple bypass because it was a genetic thing in the family on that side. And my brother died 10 years ago, 11 years ago, aged 58. So there was always a risk of that in the family. Families otherwise has quite good longevity. My dad passed away last year at 96, so if I've got those genes, I'll be doing well. But I had been taking statin medication anyway, but I was fortunate. I was just back from a government-sponsored trip to Hong Kong that happened on the plane. I might have been in a little bit more difficulty. And Friday night, I had a tightening of the chest and felt like I had indigestion, and I slept very badly that night and went into East Care out in Pakuranga on Saturday morning. It was the only place that's 24 hours open, non-hospital. They did an ECG on me and just rang an ambulance and took me straight up, and an hour later I was lying on my back with a piece of wire stuck up my artery and into my heart, thinking there are a whole lot of better ways to spend this weekend than this.
Although, boy, oh boy, it was good that you were there. And let's use this as a public health message. You have a family history in parts of the family, and you felt something going on in your chest. So, by golly, you did the right thing seeking some medical attention, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was kind of reluctant to go up on the Friday night. My wife and daughter said to me, "Hey, Dad, why don't you go up and get that checked out?" And I said, "Look, it's probably nothing. I've just come back from a long flight. That's probably a factor in it. I'll see how the night goes and get it checked out in the morning." Now, as it happened, that didn't cause me any real harm. But anybody that has pains in the chest, and they're not severe pain. Well, they certainly weren't in my case. But a tightening of your breath, aches in your shoulder or your arm, those are generally symptoms, and you need to check it out. And look, I talked to the surgeon this morning, and he said, "You should have come in straight away." And I said, "Well, look, I know you guys are busy. I kind of didn't want to come in on the off chance it might have been indigestion. I would have felt pretty bloody foolish."
Yes,
he said, "Don't worry about that. If you've got the symptoms, we're always pleased that people come in early and check it out. You were lucky. Had it gone another way, you might not be here to talk to me about it." So it is quite important. And look, I want to give credit where it's due. We do a lot of bitching, and we do a lot of bitching about those things, don't we, in life, as Kiwis? But people say public health system. When you've got an acute problem in New Zealand, you get immediate admission. You get top quality care from a fantastic multicultural staff here in Auckland, very professional, very caring, points out of 100, 99.9. They've been fantastic. And, we should be grateful that we have a system in this country that doesn't ask to see your private medical insurance, which I don't have any of, doesn't ask you where you come from in society. Wherever you come from, they treat you equally to the very best standard, and that is something. We should be a glass half full society, not a glass half empty. That's something to rejoice about our system.
I'm delighted to talk to you, but haven't you been told to rest?
Yeah, just about everybody on Facebook has given me that message.
Right.
My wife, the doctors. I'm not very good at resting. I explained to them that you know, if I don't have a challenge and I don't have an issue, I get stressed about that. So
Okay, well, you just...
I was on a teleconference at 8 o'clock this morning with Vector, you know, talking about the power outage in Auckland, which has been a serious problem for us. So no, I'm fine. I'm being sensible about it. But,
I hate to violate my own request of you to take it easy, but whilst you're mentioning the power outages, is it good enough that it's going to go over a week for some people?
No, it's certainly not good enough, and I say that without reflection on, you know, the incredibly hard work that's going in from a whole lot of the people working on the lines and our CD people. You know, we visited 5,000 homes over the weekend just to check how people were, to provide water, to provide portaloos, to offer assistance in any way we could. And I know that the Vector's pulled in linesmen from all over the North Island. But there are some real problems out there. You know, we never said this was a cyclone, but actually it hit Auckland much worse than any of the cyclones that we had earlier this year. We dodged the bullet earlier this year, but we copped winds of up to 215 kilometres an hour. And when you get winds and you get power lines and you get trees, they're not a great combination. You know, I've talked to Vector. I've said, look, you've just got to sit down and look at how you can improve both the predictive nature of these events, how you can get those lines up and running, and how you can communicate to people. And they agreed on each of those 3 points. I know they have been out trimming the trees back. They took 10 trees out on my property earlier this year. I wasn't that happy, but I knew why they had to do it. I know that, you know, if sometimes you can underground, it's safer. The wind doesn't catch an underground line. But, you know, they've gone through all of the arguments with me. It's $2 to $3 billion to underline the remaining half of the lines that aren't underground in Auckland. And even then, you've got problems. The tree roots, if the tree roots will pull the wires out, or if you're trying to underground them, you're wiping out the root feeder systems of trees that might be in the street. So I'm not pretending to them that it's easy, but I am telling them, when people have been, you know, we were without power for 30 hours at home. That's stretching you a little bit. But these people that are still out, you know, there's probably 500 to 1,000 of them at the moment. They've been without power for 6 days. And, you know, I understand the real pressure that's putting on them. So any way that we can improve the system, we've got to adopt some changes, because with climate change, these sort of events may become more regular.
Phil Goff talking to us literally from his hospital bed earlier. I hope he's turned the phone off. Phil, if you're listening, put your phone down. 16 minutes past 6, Mark Middleton, so much feedback on that interview from earlier. The Associate Immigration Minister, Chris Whāwhoi, has been asked to grant an exception to Immigration New Zealand's instructions to deport Wellington man Mark Middleton, the British stepfather, well, British born, he came here when he was 4, of the murdered teenager Campbell, who was accused of being in New Zealand unlawfully and now faces deportation after living here for 56 years. National's immigration spokesperson Michael Woodhouse told our producer Bridget Burke a short time ago the Minister has the power to do the right thing and is calling on him to do so.
This is not unusual. There were a number of people that arrived from the United Kingdom between the 1950s and the 1970s where their documentation wasn't well recorded, and they didn't realise that until well into their adult life. There is a very simple process, either for the Minister or for Immigration New Zealand, to exercise its discretion and grant Mr Middleton residence, and that's what I think they should do. And the question of whether he should stay just has to be answered right now.
How do you think it got to this stage?
I have no idea, and I'm frankly disappointed that he's been treated in the way that he has. But as I say, I have dealt with cases personally, not quite the same as this, but not too dissimilar, and the outcome was speedy resolution and residence. I should also note that the Labour Party and opposition were very critical of the Australian government for their treatment of New Zealanders under Section 501 of their Immigration Act, calling on the Australian government to show a bit of compassion. Well, this is an opportunity for the Labour government and Mr Whāwhoi to do just that. And if they don't act quickly, I think that would be a very, very grave shame and an indictment on them.
That's Michael Woodhouse talking to our producer Bridget Burke a short time ago. Let's head to the far north. Wetland campaigners in the region are fuming over peat mining consents granted to an Auckland company. The Northern Regional Council has approved plans by Resin and Wax Holdings to dig up part of the Kaimomo wetland, which is owned by iwi. The company's found a way to extract valuable compounds from the peat, but conservationists fear it'll do irreparable harm to that environment. Lois Williams reports.
The Auckland-based company Resin and Wax has been working for years on its plan to squeeze useful stuff out of peat. It's had government backing with 2 grants from the Callaghan Innovation Fund, and now it's got the green light from the Northland Regional Council. It's been granted a raft of resource consents for a commercial kauri resin and wax extraction operation over roughly 10% of the 400-hectare Kaimomo wetland. The land's owned by the local iwi, Ngai Takoto, who support the venture, but local conservationists are not happy.
This is a very, very special place in Northland. Contains a long list of endangered species, including birds, orchids and lizards.
That's Fiona Thorrell from the Northland Environmental Protection Society, and she says it's unbelievable that the Regional Council didn't notify the consents, that is, put them out for public comment. Ms Thorrell says the extraction site borders land owned by the public, that is by DOC, including a highly protected scientific reserve. She's worried peat mining will destroy the habitat of rare flora and fauna and put the Opoli aquifer at risk of salt water incursion.
They will be mining way below sea level. In places on that land, it is only 1.5 metres above sea level. They've said they'll be going down 5 metres. They would have no idea, and no one does. There's no baselines done on it as to what the effect would be on the wetland or the aquifer or the water tables in general for the district.
The Regional Council's regulatory manager, Colin Dell, says the council saw no need to notify the consents because it judged the peat mining venture wouldn't harm neighbouring wetlands or the aquifer. He says it based that judgment on reports commissioned by the company doing the mining.
In particular, it had specific reports on the ecology of the wetland and also a report looking into the effects of the proposal on hydrology of the wetland and surrounding water resources.
But Colin Dell says the Conservation Department has flagged concerns about the peat mining.
The department had concerns about the potential effect of the proposal on obviously the wetlands that it manages to the north, including the effects of the proposal on the hydrology of the wetlands.
But the council's dismissed those concerns.
Well, the council has considered those concerns and the information provided with the application and satisfied that the effects will have no more than minor effects on the wetlands to the north.
The peat mining project has had moral but not financial support from the Regional Council's economic development arm, Northland Inc. Its chief executive, David Wilson, says Ngai Takoto's land at present is barren, but peat mining will actually make it fit for agriculture. He says extracting the resins and replacing the remaining soil will make it more fertile.
If you put what is left back into the land, you have an opportunity to remediate that land and make it possibly even productive instead of what it currently is, which is growing ground for various noxious and invasive weeds.
David Wilson says the resin and wax venture is expected to employ about 20 people when it's up and running and support Ngai Takoto's vision of a better economic future. For Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Nearly half of New Zealanders want to keep working after they reach retirement, and apparently some need to keep working financially, but some just want to stay in the workforce. Shannon Honui-Thompson spoke to 2 pensioners who are still yet to retire.
69-year-old Wayne Boynton has loved his 20 years as a charter bus driver. He enjoys going places and meeting different people. So when he turned 65, his birthday came and went without a thought of retirement.
Yeah, when I turned 65, I felt it was just another year for me, but I was, keep reasonably healthy. You can sort of keep, I thought I'll keep on working, and I enjoy the work, and my health is in pretty good, so I thought I'd keep going.
Agri-business banker Paul Buist is 76 years old and has worked at the BNZ for 26 years. He's mostly worked in the rural finance sector, meaning he's travelled a lot, but helping people is his main motivation.
Helping people with their issues would be the best part. And I enjoy the stimulus that goes with, doing the job and talking with people, hearing their views on what's happening around the place.
Paul Buist says continuing to work beyond the age of 65 has also had financial benefits. He's been able to afford to travel to visit his children overseas. His advice for those considering working beyond the retirement age is to have a plan and being open to changes.
You've spoken about being able to talk into a cell phone, 20 years ago and actually do your banking on it, and amongst other things. It would have been very hard to comprehend how that would happen. The speed of technological change has been such that if it continues at this rate, what is very relevant today will be totally obsolete.
The Retirement Commissioner Diane Maxwell isn't surprised by the BNZ survey. The Commission did a survey in 2016 which had similar results. She says many people have told her they don't want to be written off just because they're over 65, as they feel they can still contribute to society. Ms Maxwell says it's also positive for the economy to have people working for longer.
As we move through to different dependency ratios, which simply means we will have fewer people working to support retirees, enabling people to work longer will matter for our economy. We have very low unemployment. We have shortages of certain skills. We have businesses looking for skilled workers, certainly outside Auckland, and we will need to have people trained and skilled and ready to work.
Diane Maxwell says the Retirement Commission works with many groups, including school children, to prepare them for retirement. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Shannon Haunui-Thompson, ahau.
Right, just before we go tonight, medals won by Kiwi women outnumbered medals won by Kiwi men 23-20 at the Commonwealth Games. Sports Minister Grant Robertson has identified women's participation in sport as his top priority. So Megan Whelan spoke to some of the biggest names in New Zealand sport to ask them what that means.
They had won gold, the New Zealand women's hockey team.
When you look out at the podium of those hockey players receiving that ultimate award, the gold medal, knowing that they're doing that juggling study and juggling work and family, says something about our athletes, but also the fact we need to continue to elevate a range of codes and a range of women in those codes.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern celebrated alongside the Black Sticks women as they won New Zealand's first ever Commonwealth Games hockey gold medal. Black Sticks player Frances Davies says only a few years ago she was the one being inspired.
Before we were getting a photo with the little girl, like the younger girls, and they were so excited to see us. Honestly, it's just so awesome to be able to inspire younger people, and hopefully one day that they can get their dream.
Teammate Sally Rutherford says making sport more accessible is one of the first tasks.
Hockey is a more expensive sport than some other sports, and I think we need to move away from that as much as we can and get community sport out there, and Hockey New Zealand's doing a great job at doing that, but the more we can do that, the better, and the wider the net we can cast in terms of getting people into the sport.
It is my absolute honour to name the flag bearer for the 2018 Commonwealth Games as Sophie Pascoe.
I think that's the great thing about the Commonwealth Games. There is so much integration. Obviously, we've got more women's sports now, obviously, here. So it's not just about, having the para-athletes here as part of the integration. It's some more women's sports. And that's what we want. This is what sport's about. Sport is about being proud to wear our country's flag and carry our nation on our shoulders.
As well as including para-athletes for the first time, like double gold medalist Sophie Pascoe, the Gold Coast Games is the first Games ever where there's been an equal number of events for women and for men. Lawn bowls gold medalist Jo Edwards says as well as girls, there's a gap for women who have finished their careers in other sports.
I played a lot of soccer back in my other life before bowls, and I think that there's a really huge market there. But the kids, I think it's no longer uncool to play bowls. People used to be in their whites and say they were off to cricket because they were too embarrassed. But there's such a pathway. I've been amazed with what I've seen and done with the game, and it's an awesome sport. It's a hard sport to play, and I just love it.
What about for you, Dame Valerie? Bowls, is that next on the agenda?
Yes.
I think I might be a little bit too strong for that. No, my ball's a little bit heavier than the little bomb bowls, but I'm sure I can taper down my strength and give it a good crack.
Gold medalist in the hammer throw, Julia Ratcliffe, says it also comes down to what sells on TV.
But I think obviously encouraging women from a young age and having special programs for them, because again, lots of people, even in employment, lots of people use the argument, oh, we want to employ women, but they just won't apply. And it's kind of like, you really have to go out and search for them. You really have to go and handpick them and nurture them and encourage them and say, hey, you can do this. This is an option for you, as opposed, because lots of girls just think that it's not. It's just not an option. So yeah, I think that's so important to see the Black Ferns and teams like that, because it does give little girls dreams and it shows them that they can do it.
And that's something that gold medal winning Sevens captain Sarah Goss is very aware of.
At the end of the day, we want more and more kids to be, or especially little girls, to be able to be professional athletes, and that's really special. And whether they're playing rugby or, to me, they're playing hockey or netball, it doesn't matter, as long as they're chasing to achieve their goals and to become a professional athlete is pretty special.
Para javelin silver medalist Holly Robinson says the contracts for the women's rugby players are an important step.
For our young kids, back home in New Zealand watching the Commonwealth Games, to see young females and females in general competing at the elite level, it shows them that they can actually do that as well.
Never a true word spoken from Holly Robinson, who got silver at the Gold Coast and silver, of course, at Rio. That ends Checkpoint for tonight. Megan Whelan's a fascinating report. Thank you for being with us, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Immigration Minister has been asked to intervene in the case of Mark Middleton, who's facing deportation after 56 years in the country. A Christchurch homeowner is starting a hunger strike in protest at an unresolved earthquake insurance claim. More Kiwis watched the Commonwealth Games on free-to-air TV than followed the Rio Olympics on Sky and Prime. And rugby's boss, Steve Chu, says streaming the World Cup shouldn't be an issue for most Kiwis. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Death is real.
Last year, Phil Elverum, who records as Mount Erie, released one of the most starkly personal documents of grief ever put on disc. Now he's made a sequel. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be discussing Mount Erie's now only in the sampler. I'll be reviewing an album of Bob Dylan songs by soul veteran Betty LaVette and something unexpected from Mr. Dylan himself. That's in the sampler.